Having now completed everything there is to do in the beta version of TDU3, all the roads, all the vehicles, all the events, I'm still looking forward to the full rollout. I'm really crossing my fingers that I don't lose all of that progression, especially all of the roads that I discovered, but I think I probably will, unfortunately. I do have some gripes about the game though. A couple of these things could be changed, and maybe they will. I'm sure I'm not the only person who's felt a couple of these things, and a couple of them probably never will be because they're more a core of the game. There are 6 things in particular which have jumped out to me, and incidentally, for those who didn't see it, Nacon have announced their first year's roadmap for the game, so Ibiza's coming back sooner than later, which is cool. Another map is always a good thing. Personally, I'm really hoping for Hawaii again, but we'll see. And later on down the line than I would have expected, the casino is returning. Personally, I couldn't care less about the casino, but in the second game in particular, a lot of people really did seem to like that, so sure. Presumably a lot of DLC packs. I'm really crossing my fingers for having motorbikes in there at some point, but again, in the second game, they didn't really give motorcycles a huge amount of love. And especially down the line, you can't even access the bikes in the second game anymore, which is pretty annoying. We're going to return to that point of accessing stuff later on, but the first thing which kind of bugs me, and it bugs me in a way which I don't think will bother some people and will bother others more. For me, I don't actually care that much, but for some people it really will be a killer. This game is very much the Forza school of all-wheel drive beats everything. And I first noticed that in my first proper rain event, because you'll have a rear-wheel drive car like a Mustang, for example, that I was driving early on in the game, and you'll notice something like an Audi TT just eating up the ground. If it's behind you, it catches up like it's nothing. If it's ahead, you won't be able to catch it, even in a fully built car, because this game really does favour grip more than anything. So if you're in a Lambo, if you're in presumably a Nissan GTR, if you're in something like an Audi TT even, which is the most OP low-level vehicle in the game by far, so I'm actually making another video down the line in terms of some tips for those starting to play the game, and one of the things I'm going to mention in that video is exactly about this point. It's one of those things which could put some people off. I'm not necessarily saying it's the most annoying thing ever, because that's fairly realistic. If you have a 4-wheel drive or all-wheel drive car, it does have more grip. So in bad weather conditions, that's accurate. And of course, off-road, it makes a huge difference as well. It's just one of those things where I think for some, it might hamper your enjoyment of the game, because it pretty much makes a map which has so much rain and so much wet road driving kind of a no-brainer in terms of the vehicles you sort of have to choose. You could win in a rear-wheel drive car, but it's just so much more of a challenge than just picking a 4-wheel drive and dominating everything. The next one is something which I feel like a lot of games, especially from the earlier era of your Project Gothams and TDUs, really fell into, and it's kind of annoying to see it back because I hadn't noticed it in some time, and let's call it the arbitrary speed reducing effects, let's say, of hitting into certain objects versus others. Of course, with TDU it was always the traffic. There is still traffic in this game, but it's no way near of an annoyance, which I'm personally quite happy about. Sometimes I'll drive around for a while with no traffic at all. I think it might have been pared back for the beta though, to make it easier on the servers. You never know. But regardless of the traffic, what actually annoyed me the most is stuff like railings, because you can smash through trees like it's nothing on this game, even fairly large trees. Whereas you take a corner in a normal car, you're way out in the lead, you tap a railing and it suddenly feels like the car has come to a dead stop, even though it is technically a breakable object. That is really annoying, and it's very clearly one of the ways that the game kind of justifies rubber banding the AI right up back behind you again. And that is an annoying thing. It's one of those things which a lot of games used to do, but because I haven't experienced that in quite some time, it was annoying to have that sensation back again. And that is one of those things which, if they wanted to, they could pretty easily fix, I would imagine. Just reduce the speed reduction effects of hitting into certain things. Whether or not they will, I doubt it, but that's my 2 cents. The next one I think actually will be something that they might have to improve, because I feel like a lot of people are going to be annoyed by this one, and that is a certain aspect of the camera control. Now, the way the camera snaps between the 360 rotation around the car when you're stationary versus when you're moving, you can get used to that. It does get a bit annoying when you're trying to look around the car and it's switching between the 2 camera styles, but you'll experience that when you play the game yourself. What I'm really annoyed by is how long the camera takes to snap back to the standard position. So for example, if you look behind you in a race, which I guarantee you will be doing often to check out where the AI is going to try and hit into you or block them, by the time the camera's swiveled back around again, in my case for example using chase cam, but even in cockpit cam the same thing applies really, the camera takes quite a while to return to the normal position. And when I say like half a second or maybe even more, that doesn't sound like much, but that's an eternity, especially if you're coming up to a fast corner, you're waiting for the camera to swivel back around, and now you've hit into traffic or something because you couldn't see where you were going. Some people would just say, well, don't look around, don't look behind you. It's not really an option in this game. You've got to be keeping your head on a swivel because of the AI. And again, that is something which they could easily fix. Gran Turismo, for example, through GT Sport and GT7, adjusted the way the camera works quite drastically in some cases, removing functionality of 360, adding it back again later, etc. So it's definitely something they could change, and I think they might have to, because it feels quite sluggish sometimes. The final three things are all intrinsically tied together, and you'll really understand what I'm talking about when we get to the final one. But these next two are the kind of things where if you haven't played the game, if you haven't watched that much gameplay, and if you haven't played the beta, you're probably going to be like, huh? Because it doesn't make any sense. The first thing is, you cannot pause in races. In 2024, that is a ridiculous thing to say about any game. But the reason why is because every event, and I didn't realise this when I was first playing the beta, but of course since then I realised, in the beta at least, and I don't know how this will apply to the full game, every event, and I mean literally every race that you enter, aside from time trials, so every sprint, every circuit that involves more than just you on the grid in other words, is an open multiplayer event technically. And if somebody happens to join the lobby, it will be you and them and AI. Now that sounds like it could work, but in reality that means you can't pause the event, because obviously they can't be paused. So even if no one else joins the lobby and it's just you and the AI, you still can't pause the event because it's technically a multiplayer. Now somebody can't join once the race is already going, of course, but it means that if you press pause, it will open the menu, but your car will just carry on driving and bash into a wall as the AI carries on and overtakes you. That's really dumb. Now I get it in a multiplayer, of course it's not an option, but the game should know the difference between if there is or isn't a real player in the room with you. And I would imagine that's probably something which they're going to have to fix later on, because that's a pretty rudimentary thing, which I think they probably will have to do. Because otherwise, if you're in a longer race, you'll just lose your progress. If you have a phone call, somebody knocks the door, get distracted for any reason, you just cannot pause. So that will get really tedious, and sometimes it does get very tedious. The second thing is intrinsically tied into that, because not only can you not properly pause the race, there's no restart button either. So unless you're in a time trial, if you're in a sprint or a circuit, again more traditional races both on and off-road, you cannot press restart. You have to literally quit the race, which puts you back out to the map. Then you have to click, flash your headlights to enter the race again, pick your car again, enter the race again, load the race again, and then start all over again, instead of just pause, restart, and getting on with it. Now again, I think part of that is because of the multiplayer functionality, but it's still very, very dumb. And I'm hoping that part of the game might be tailored between whether or not you want to play with other players, or if you want to just approach the career mode, if you will, without anyone else being on the grid. I really hope that that's an option, because otherwise that is also very, very annoying, especially if you were in some super long event, which presumably you'll have toward the latter half of the game, I would imagine, because in the beta we only have access to the basically top half of the map, pretty much. Then taking that extra time to jump back out again and back into the race, it's just annoying. It's unnecessary, and it's a burden. Of course, again, if it's a multiplayer, that shouldn't be there, but the game should know the difference. But if there's no other real people in the room, there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't be able to just click restart, because it's just ridiculous not to have that. The final thing, as I said, is tied into those previous two, and this for many people is probably the biggest issue, which many people have already spoken about, which is why I've left it until last. It's so obvious. The online-only aspect. And I feel like this is kind of a moot point, unfortunately, because so many games have it, even Gran Turismo, for example, but it's very obvious here because of how those other things, those other gripes, those other stupid ways of approaching the game are so intrinsically tied into this. You could play TDU 1 and 2, especially the first one, without ever coming across another player, and you'd be just fine. You have AI drivers running around, AI drivers in events, and you could happily play through the whole game with no internet connection. We are just not living in that time anymore, unfortunately. The problem of this being a digital-only game with the very real potential of losing either the game itself or at the very least access to DLC later on, such as the crew of course, and as I said earlier on in the video, you cannot access motorcycles anymore in TDU2, even if you previously had the DLC, which I did. I've been able to get almost all of the DLC from TDU 1 and 2 to re-download, even now with the Xbox 360 marketplace being gone. I can still do it, but for this game that probably wouldn't be possible, and that online only aspect not only has those issues, but it does concern me how many of these stupid decisions in terms of like the menu, not being able to pause properly, or even smaller stuff like the camera snapback. If you're only up against AI, sure, but if you're up against real people, you need to keep your head on a swivel. These other things are going to be more accentuated if you are racing against smarter, faster, real humans than just AI. So that's it for my initial gripes. This is only of course covering the beta. We'll have to see if any of these are addressed, because I'm sure they are listening to feedback. That's kind of the point of the beta, to iron out issues and to see how the servers can cope and get feedback from players. So I'm hoping that they take some of these things to heart and improve them. Overall though, despite all of these being of course negative things, I am, as I said, looking forward to the game. I'm certainly going to be playing it. I really hope I don't lose all the roads that I've unlocked. I probably will, but I am also going to be putting out more TDU3 content, so if you haven't bought it yet and you want to see more of it before you do, of course, stick around. If you are planning to jump into the game, you haven't played the beta, and you'd like some beginner's tips, the best cars to buy, the quickest way to progress through the game and get a load of cash, I am going to be doing those as well, and trust me when I say the tips I'm going to give are really going to help you. They will make a massive difference, and none of them are particularly difficult things to achieve. So stick around for that video especially, very soon after the game releases, and of course I'll see you then with more, and for now, thanks for watching.